Hey everybody, Cindy Daychuck here with Queen Bee Creations. Today's project is kind of a fun one and one that you might want to do with the kids even. And it is to create a little fairy house out of an old ceramic cookie jar. Now, you might have one of these lying around your house. If not, any of your local thrift stores are filled with tons of these. You don't need them to be any particular color, just look for a size and a shape that you want. Now, very often fairy gardens, little fairy houses, people stagger outside. If so, then you're going to want to seal it for outside. I have this one that I'm looking at sitting inside in a bedroom of a young child, and I'm going to leave it so the lid opens up. So it's kind of like a fairy house treasure storage place that they've got a place to be able to put away and hide any of their special little trinkets and things. So we're going to do it up in a way that is cute, that makes sense. Now, I'm here in my workshop, so I'm going to be using air dry clay for a lot of my embellishments. That said, as I go along, I'm going to try and give you some ideas of how to use a clay if you'd like to use the clay, obviously, but I'll also give you some alternatives because these are great little projects to be able to use up anything that you have in your house. So if you're looking at doing it with kids, you want it done as inexpensively as possible, I'm going to give you some ideas. If you're looking at it being something that you're going to do and you want to use the clay, then join me because that's what I'll be doing. I'm also going to be giving you some alternatives along the way that can give you fun looks, but without having to buy a lot of the molds and things like that that I have hanging out here in my shop. So the first thing that I want to do, now I deliberately chose one with a knob on the top rather than a big handle or something, just because this is going to be mud chimney. But, you know, you can have whatever kind of embellishment on the top of your house you would like. I'm going to start on the door. I think it's kind of a good place to go, and then it gives me a good sense of where else I might be going. For this, what I am going to be doing is rolling out some clay. Again, in my shop, I don't have a rolling pin here. I paint and decorate rolling pins. You'd think that I would have an extra undone one around, but no. So I'm just using a spray can. You know, sometimes you just have to do this. Now, if you're looking for any of the clay or some of the molds, those kinds of things I'm going to be using, you can hit up the website, queenbeecreationshome.com. But again, you can use whatever. So I'm going to be using some clay to be able to create the door on this, but you could cut out a piece of cardboard and attach the cardboard because we're going to be painting this, so it's going to give you kind of that raised, standout kind of texture. Now, I am looking for this being arched. So my one big tool is my X-Acto knife. I'm going to be using the heck out of this in this project. So I am just, and you can see I am just freestyling this. I am not agonizing over whether or not I have a perfect arch or not. So, I mean, if you're more of a perfectionist, go for it. So I am just looking at maybe scoring some little planks so that I have a nice wooden door. So I'm just taking my X-Acto knife. I am not pushing all the way through. I'm not looking at cutting individual boards. And I do have this tiny little stamp that is kind of just a texture tool. So I am looking at just kind of pushing this in a little bit to give a little bit of texture, rough kind of board-like texture to this. and I'll lift it up and show you. I'm not looking at doing it all over, but I am looking here. It's gonna be easier to lift it up there. Can you see some of that texture that I put in there? So I still have the faint boards, I still have the texture, and now I'm gonna lift this off of my mat, flip it over, and glue. Glue is gonna be your best friend for this. Okay, I just have to lift off the part that's dried up on there. And I'm going to glue this. So, fairly well, but I'm not looking at, I'm looking around to see if I have something to help me with my glue. No, okay, so then we're using my finger. So I want enough glue that it will stick. I'm using Titebond. So I've got Titebond 3, I think, which is a wood glue, but it is awesome at sticking anything. And this is a fairly fast drying glue so that I don't have to wait forever for it. Let me take the lid off of my crock here. And I just kind of guessed on the height, but I don't mind that size. But I am going to cut off the bottom a bit because, all right, so here's the one thing. These things are curved, so they're gonna have a little bit of an arch. And I just find it easier to cut away the excess when it gets on there than to try and worry about it afterward. You want to have enough glue for it to stick, but you don't want so much glue that it wants to slide off. What you can do is, if they are slipping a little bit, is just put a bit of painter's tape over it to hold it in place while it dries. And then that's going to give you the opportunity to kind of deal with it while it dries. Let it sit in place, and then you can kind of take it. Now I've got some clay here that has a bit of glue on it, but I am going to roll a little piece of it up so that I can create a bit of a knob on here. Now here's the thing, if you had a little tack or a little button and you wanted to put it in place, you could just glue that to be your handle. You don't have to, again, be using clay for everything. If I was doing this at my house, I would have a lot more little knickknacks that I could use to be able to do this. Okay? But looks kind of cute. Okay, so that's my door. I wanted to, this has kind of got a raised texture up here, kind of like a trellis. So I'm gonna use that as part of the design. I'm thinking that I want to have a couple of little windows up there though. I think that the windows would be too small, too low being here. So I'm gonna do 2 windows up here, and I might do kind of 2 roundish windows. So again, I'm just going to roll out my clay, and with this clay, you see me constantly putting it away and covering it over. Just, it's air dry, so the longer it's exposed to the air, then it's going to start sapping a lot of the moisture out already. So just keep it locked away. If you find that your clay starts to go a little bit dry on you, then you can just simply put like just a little damp paper towel there. I might do round windows. So there's 1, 2, and I might, since I've got this rolled out already, I might consider, all right, so I'm just using a bottle cap for my little circles here. You go with what you got. And again, your piece may lend itself well to a different shape. Nice square windows, perhaps. You could, again, cut those out. If you're doing it with the kids too, I mean, you could put curtains. If it's staying inside, you could go as fancy as you want. Use little pieces of lace in there. What I'm thinking, and why I've cut a couple of extra, is just because we need to do some roof tiles on the top. So, in which case, let me just check one window. And I think that's going to be a nice size. So let me glue that on, I'll show you. And then I'll show you what I'm thinking of for the roof. And then I'll show you how I think I'm going to embellish this. And then I'll just have at it. Okay, so that's going to be one of my little windows. And really it's going to come alive a little bit more with the paint job, right? Where I can put, you know, a little bit of panes in there. But I'm going to stick 2 of those up. And what I'm thinking about this is that I am going to layer my circles over top of each other like this. So a couple of rows all the way around up to the chimney, and that they're just going to be my roof tiles. So just a little bit more interesting, have them be a little bit round. You start to get an idea, it starts to take shape. We'll see it a little bit more as we paint it up as well. And I will continue to do the roof after. But the other thing that I was thinking that I'd like to do is just take some of this clay and create some vines and some flower. Now, you could decorate all the way around this. You could put a back door. You can have as many bushes and trees as you would like. So going to town is, you know, how crazy you want to go. Now, I'm going to roll out this clay into vines and glue it on. You could take string and glue it on as vines. You could take, you know, hit up your dollar store and find some little tiny craft flowers and use those as your flowers to be able to decorate, in which case put them on after you've painted the item, right? So here, super simple, just keep rolling it until you get a nice long thin tube, as long as you know, as thin as you want and you need it to be. So these are going to be the main branches, so I think that that's pretty good. I'm going to have it maybe go that tall. Here's the tricky part with it being so thin. Now I have a bunch of glue that's kind of on my board, so I'm just kind of running it through that, and we'll see if that ends up being enough or not. There we go. So there's part of my vine. And what I'll do is I will have a couple of thinner branches coming off of it, and then I'll put some little leaves and some flowers on it that I can paint out. I do have some little molds, so you can use, maybe you've got some fondant molds, that's what this one is, for cake decorating. Maybe you've got some cookie cutters in the shape of trees or animals that you want to add on it. You know, think about what you've got, because not all of these crafts are about having to make, you know, major life investments to be able to do it. And especially with kids, it's perfect to be able to do things that you know, you've already got in the house. Okay, so I have those vines that I need to add florals to, and I need to do something up the other side. This has had a chance to dry overnight. So my clay is nice and solid. So the next step in the process really, and here's my little lid. The next step in the process is to begin painting it. Now, to do this, I recommend painting the whole thing, base coating it. And in particular, base coat it whatever the main color is that you want your building to be. And then once that's nice and smooth, probably 2 coats, then you can go in and we'll start doing some of the detail painting. To do this, I have decided that I want this to be a little bit older looking. So rather than going in with a bright white, I did start with DIY beadboard, which is a nice clean white, but I've added some cake batter, which is kind of a bit of an ochre pale yellow to it. So I've ended up with that really pale kind of ochre color, sort of like, you know, the aged Venetian plaster kind of look, which I think will be a nice soft look on it. And I am just going to paint everything. I'm going to paint over the exposed ceramic part. I'm going to paint over the clay, just so that as I go to add on any of my other colors afterward, I've got a nice base. And I like DIY paint for this because it does stick well to ceramics and glass and metals, etc. So I'm not going to have to worry about it flaking off later once it's cured. So no magic to this step. I am simply going to do 2 coats. So 1 coat, let it dry, add my 2nd coat over top, and then the fun part begins. Then we get to start adding some of our color. Once your pot is dry, and I have 2 coats of that soft kind of beigey ochre kind of look, then you can start to paint it. Now mine is not all dry yet, but I'm going to paint some of the dry areas. Just a little eager to get started. So for this, I am just using inexpensive little acrylics. And what I do, and let me just add a couple of colors, is I just take an inexpensive little plastic placemat. So I use these. And I just kind of dab my colors out on it, so then I can just kind of mix as I go. And for this, you're going to want to have some little paintbrushes, so some small paintbrushes, and you just kind of go from there. So my door is fairly dry, so I'm going to start in on that. And I'm just going to be grabbing a couple of the colors. So I'm thinking here, and you can blend on it as you go as well. So this is where you just have fun with this. You know, what's the look you're after? What are you trying to do with this? And kind of go from there. Use what you have, right? So we're not looking at having to go out and buy a whole whack of paints. Use what colors you have and kind of mix and blend them to create whatever look you're after. I've added some texture in the door. I'm just going over it with my paint. I'm just adding, right, some color in, and then I'll go back in and I can add a little bit more detail to it if I want. But really, this is the fun part. Now you get to kind of, as much as the look of it was already personalized, right? It was already, the design was yours, you know, however you wanted it to look. Now you get to use whatever colors you want. And if you're doing a series of them, then you can have fun, you know, because if you do these up and you wanted to put them out in your back garden for the kids, you know, you can put a hotel, you can have, you know, a church, you can do a whole series of them if you want, or just even making them into various Christmas houses as well. So especially as you get canisters that are different sizes, you can be able to do these up into various Christmas houses that you pull out. And it's a great way to maybe have different Christmas treats staged up in your home, right? Because the canisters are going to open up and you've got different treats in there. So I'm just going to carry on painting, and there's nothing more complicated than that, although I'm probably putting my elbow into paint here as I go. But you can see that it starts to create some definition. I'm going to carry on, and I'm just going to have fun and feel like I'm working while I'm doing this. This is me at work. And I'll pop back to you and we'll talk about finishing it off and sealing and all that kind of fun stuff. And I'll show you what it looks like painted up. All right, so this is my little fairy house now that it's all painted. Got some little flowers in the back. Got my big green tree. My door, my windows, my roof. So you can see that you could go as intricate as you like. I mean, I painted very faintly a couple of bricks in there, that kind of thing, just for a little bit of added detail. But it opens up to hide all the treasures away. And really, it's just kind of a super cute little idea for putting into a child's room, or just as a way of decorating up your cookie jar if you'd like. So it really is kind of a sweet idea and something that's kind of fun, maybe to gift to a child for them to be able to store their treasures, to make with a child so that they have something that's theirs, that they've made, to be able to hide their treasures away, or seal with an outdoor sealant and put outside in the garden, right? If I was doing it in the garden, I would probably do the following. I would have done it upside down, and I would have glued the lid onto the top so that it's not going to be leaking or collecting water inside of it at any point. So I would just have done it upside down if I was doing it outside. So just use a sealant that is good for outdoors and you're good to go. All that's left to do on mine is to be able to seal it. And you know, again, I used an acrylic paint, in which case it kind of almost self-seals, but this was my DIY paint, so it's a clay-based paint. It's not sealed, so I want to be able to seal the entire piece. I could wax it, but again, I kind of envision that this is going to be something that gets a fair bit of use, so I'm going to want to poly it. In which case, you could just get a spray Varathane to be able to spray it, or I'm going to use my DIY Big Top and just brush it over to be able to finish it. Leave it to dry, to cure, and then you're good to go. You're ready. So I hope that you do something like this. I want pictures if you do. So something that's just kind of fun, kind of cute. Again, using items like I did with the DIY clay and some of the molds, or just simply some found items in the house. Use twine to be able to paint over it, you know, hot glue it on for some of your vines, buttons for, you know, some of your roof tiles, I mean, whatever you happen to have. It need not be an expensive project for it to be a super fun and ultimately pretty darn cute one. So let me see pictures. You know I want to see them. I will be coming at you again next week with another different DIY craft and project for you to be able to turn your hand to. If you haven't already, subscribe, give me a big thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.